Well, let's get into the debate now with former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, who joins me on set, and former Labor Senator Stephen Conroy. Welcome to you both. I don't think it's possible to overstate just how worried Jewish Australians are right now at the level of animosity being shown towards them on what seems like a daily basis. Have a listen to my Sky News colleague Kenny Heatley chatting with a Jewish Australian in Sydney's East this morning.
There's a very big difference between what's happening here now and what happened in the 1930s in Europe, right? But this is the start of what could end up in a crazy situation.
So obviously the pressure now, as I said, is on the Albanese government to show some leadership. And bizarrely, at a press conference today, he chose to wheel out this line.
On Saturday, I visited a synagogue. Went to my first bar mitzvah there in Perth.
Bronwyn Anthony Albanese went to his first bar mitzvah. Is this supposed to make Jewish people feel like he's got their back?
He's more likely to do them in the back. I mean, seriously, the man has no leadership at all. And when I saw the vision of him in Melbourne with those people at that synagogue, I looked at his face, I listened to the tone of his voice, and I've never seen a man sending signals of, I don't want to be here at all. I mean, he and his government, of which Penny Wong is taking a lead in this matter, have let, by accident or design, and I suspect design, have let the abomination, and that's what it is, an abomination of antisemitism, almost be normalised. Yes, we have Christmas coming up with wonderful words, but you pointed out quite rightly, as I have done also, that police minister has no respect for what Minns is saying, and there is no action accordingly from the police. So he has worked out, of course, that the election is getting closer and closer. He's realised that he's under attack for his disgraceful behaviour with regard to the handling of the situation, and he feels, oh dear, I better try and ameliorate that. So he had a go at that, went to Melbourne, went to the Jewish Museum, had a press conference there, and then along the way...
Well, he actually didn't have a press conference there. He made a very brief statement and then left without taking any questions.
Quite right, thank you for the correction. But also, we've just put out an announcement that he's going to spend another $450 million on childcare, as to trying to divert the attention. So let's try and make an appeasement with the Jewish community, and let's change the topic to get to childcare. It is so pathetic to watch a man who has no backbone at all.
Stephen, you're a Labor man. Surely you're tearing your hair out at Albanese's just... I mean, it's misstep after misstep, isn't it?
Well, I think you've unfortunately just left out a few key elements of the Prime Minister's response over the last couple of weeks in particular. There's been a substantial increase in funding for protections at Jewish schools, a substantial increase in funding now for protection of synagogues. We've seen the establishment of the police task force into anti-Semitism. We've had the creation of an advisor for anti-Semitism in Gillian Siegel. So I think, unfortunately, the way you've described the circumstances, not just a full set of facts. I mean, yes, there are things that are disappointed. I don't and never have supported and would have argued against the recognition votes on the floor of the UN. They're not positions I've ever advocated or supported in the past, and I don't fully support all of them at the moment. But I think it's just a little unfair to try and say, oh, here's this, without putting the other things on the table, Stephen, for your viewers to actually understand that's there as well.
It doesn't ameliorate it at all. I mean, look at this lovely photograph of Albanese with his friend Corbyn, and it's not a lone photograph. There are lots of photographs of them together. This man, Corbyn,
there's photographs of you and Malcolm Turnbull. There are photographs of you and Malcolm Turnbull, the man you voted for in the leadership ballot.
Anti-Semitic? I don't think you are you? The point I'm making is that Corbyn is a disgraceful anti-Semitic, and here is Albanese with him, and there are lots of photographs with him. The point I'm
Everyone's got
making is that there
embarrassing
is
photos
no
like yours with
leadership at all.
Malcolm Turnbull.
No.
Everyone's got embarrassing photos. I've probably even got one with you, Bronwyn, that people might want to make fun of. So I just don't think holding up
I don't
a photo
think your little
from years
diversionary
ago.
tactics are going to work, getting away from the fact of the matter that the Prime Minister is a weak leader who has allowed anti-Semitism to become normalised, where people are no longer shocked by many of the things that are going on. And that's an appalling situation to get. And that's the way it was in Germany in the early 1930s. That's exactly what happened.
I think the average Australian is
creeps.
Absolutely
it's
disgusted.
Incremental.
Absolutely disgusted with what is going on at the moment. And
then why are we continuing to see people crying from the river to the sea if they're so disgusted? Because that means kill the Jews and give us the territory.
I said the average Australian.
That's what it means.
I know exactly what it means. I've said for 14 months.
Which Australians don't count?
Sorry,
the ones in Western Sydney,
you need to unwind the bun. Unwind the bun. It's starting to affect you. Just take the pressure off the bun because it's starting to affect
Stephen,
you. You're actually
don't try
not
to be clever.
making sense.
Don't try to be clever like that. I'm making every bit of sense.
You're not making sense.
You
I said
are trying to defend the indefensible.
I was actually agreeing with you that the average. I'm not defending the indefensible. I'm saying the average Australian out there is disgusted, and I agree with them. I've said consistently.
So why
Bronwyn,
are they permitted to
anyone who wants to march, anyone who wants to march in rallies where from the river to the sea is being chanted needs to understand front and centre that is about the destruction of the state of Israel and cannot be tolerated.
And no action is taken by the Prime Minister.
Absolutely consistent.
Let me jump in here, Stephen, because one of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of days, in fact, for longer than that, is Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier. He does seem to be providing decent leadership. You mentioned some of the things that Anthony Albanese has done, and it's true he's done some things, but I mean, he called it a terrorist attack after Peter Dutton had done so. He turned up at the Melbourne synagogue after Peter Dutton had done so. He announced a task force after Peter Dutton had done so. Chris Minns is making the Prime Minister look pretty average, isn't he?
Look, I think Chris Minns is an outstanding Premier, and I congratulate him wholeheartedly in his responses. I think in that very first incident at the Sydney Opera House, the government was just caught, I won't say flat-footed, but they were just caught by surprise. I think Minns, since that day, has made it his mission to send a very strong message across New South Wales that that sort of behaviour is not acceptable and won't be accepted by the government. I mean, there's been a raft of changes to legislation, some at federal, some at state level.
And I think the problem, Stephen, is we just haven't seen that sort of strength
intimidation.
We haven't seen that sort of strength of leadership from Anthony Albanese. I think that's what everybody is reacting to. I want to move on to Penny Wong. We played some of her comments earlier about, we expect China to obey international law, Russia to obey international law, and then she puts Israel in the same lineup. Do you think she should retract that comparison, Stephen?
I think and it was interesting, I hadn't seen the full clip before. I think it was interesting that she put context around those quotes, and in general, the reporting has not given it the full context, okay? So that's the first point. Secondly, I think at this time, it was an unfortunate bringing together of the three countries. There is no question Israel is a democratic country, but as has been said consistently for 14 months, it has to respect international law and how it conducts its dealing with the atrocity that was committed against it. And that is not a remarkable statement. I think when you put it next to the Russian invasion, when you put it next to the Chinese flouting of international law, I think that's, just the timing of that was not ideal. But in terms of a statement that says we expect Israel to respect the international laws.
Stephen, you're talking about the ICC, I take it, which we should never have signed in the first place.
No, I'm talking about how they conduct. Well, yes. Well, what I'm talking about is how they conduct their legitimate retaliation against the
Self-defense,
Hamas,
it
the
is.
Hezbollah.
Stephen, you're right.
I just said
we
that.
expect
I just
Israel
said it's
to.
legitimate.
You're right that we expect Israel to obey international law, as we expect every nation. But for her to say that in the context of Russia and China, while Anthony Albanese is responding to a terror attack against Jews in Melbourne, I mean, you're right, the timing was very unfortunate. Bronwyn Bishop, let me ask you this. Do you think those comments are having an effect on what's happening domestically? The government's comments about what's happening in the Middle East, are they giving a green light, as Senator Sharma said, to protesters here to go hard against Australian Jews?
Yes, in a word, absolutely yes. And should we be surprised at her words? After all, in the vote in the United Nations, which totally supports Palestine and is anti-Israeli, she voted against our ally, the United States, and voted with China and Russia. So why would we be surprised if she has them on her mind?